In today's episode of the Pathwing Presents podcast, I'm with Fiona Stevens. She's the head of marketing at LoyaltyLion, and today we're going to be learning all about, how she's thinking about digital growth, right? How she's sort of growing from inbound into account-based marketing, right? Has been a common theme a little bit in the last couple of episodes, and also learning about her journey as how she got where she's today. So, welcome to the show, Fiona.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Very cool. So maybe give us an overview about, LoyaltyLion. What is it all about? What is it that you guys are doing?
Absolutely. So we are a loyalty and engagement platform. We work with fast growth merchants who are using platforms like Magento, Shopify, and BigCommerce to run their e-commerce stores. And essentially, we give them the tools that they need to set up their own loyalty program really quickly and easily. So where all the barriers to entry have lowered in e-commerce and pretty much anyone can set up a store, we believe that anybody should be able to set up a loyalty program as well.
Very, very good. So who would be sort of, then be knocking at the door and say, we need LoyaltyLion? Is that like a CMO? Is that like even a specific function that is, looking after loyalty these days? Like, what's the reality behind that?
Really good question. I wish I knew the answer fully. It varies so much. So obviously we end up speaking to stores of a lot of different sizes. So one could be somebody who has, got really into baking during the last 12-month pandemic and has now set up their own baking business, and they're really small still. And there you'll have a founder or a CEO, jack of all trades, doing a little bit of everything. But then as the stores start to get bigger, we start to touch on lots more profiles. Some people will have a loyalty or retention person in place, but to be honest, it usually falls into the remit of either a digital marketer or a e-commerce director.
Got you. So you're saying it really runs the gamut from like small businesses up to larger companies. Is there particular verticals actually that where loyalty is sort of, e-commerce might be one of them, but any other sort of maybe industries that you found surprising where loyalty works particularly well?
Yeah, so it's interesting. We're predominantly e-commerce, but even within that, you see different things that perform very differently. So you might have somebody selling something really repeatable like shower gel or soap, etc. They're buying it really regularly, versus somebody, you can buy a mattress online, but that purchase only happens once every 7 years or so. So it's not so suitable for a loyalty program. So anybody who is selling something highly repeatable, and especially in the last 12 to 15 months, we've seen subscriptions really grow. So that's a common area where we're seeing loyalty programs come in more.
Okay, super interesting. What I found interesting from what you were saying is that there is these very different types of personas, right? Different types of people really leveraging the platform. So what I was wondering is if you could tell me a little bit about sort of the journey of somebody, getting started with the LoyaltyLion.
Yes, absolutely. Sorry, I was trying to get my video working again.
No worries.
And so, yeah, the journey typically, we would say, it's never too early to start thinking about customer loyalty. As soon as you've got a customer, you've got somebody who could be coming back and repeat purchasing, or who could be acting as an advocate and helping you get more customers. So in terms of their journey, I think people start to think about loyalty at different stages, but typically it's once their customer base has grown to a level that they're happy with, and it starts to become about retaining those customers simultaneously while you're trying to bring them in at the same time, which can get quite difficult to manage. And then there's obviously some key trigger events as well. If you're, for example, you are moving from one platform to another, your business is becoming more sophisticated, or it could be that you've just invested in a email technology and you want to try and get more out of that email strategy. You might look at building in loyalty so that you have more insights and more loyalty data to make your emails perform better. Or you might have decided to invest in a reviews platform, and then you start thinking, okay, well, how could I use a loyalty program to get more of those reviews? So there's a few triggers really.
Super interesting. Let's talk a little bit about acquisition channels, because on the show, obviously, we love to talk about the nuts and bolts, sort of the channels, the websites. Maybe you tell us a little bit high level, like what is the channels that you as a marketer for LoyaltyLion sort of swear by? Like what have you found to be working for you guys, and what are you excited about? Maybe what's coming next?
Yeah, I think for us, we're a very content-driven marketing team. We believe very much in sort of the idea of taking people on a journey and educating them and teaching about loyalty as we go. So for us, content's a very key thing. And obviously that plays really nicely into the SEO space and the social media space. So I'd say they're key channels for us. But the other thing about the space that we work in is partnerships. There are a lot of different technology providers working in a similar space to us with really complementary technologies. So we try and do as much co-marketing with them as possible. And again, A, it's great for our customer base because they're getting more expertise from more partners, but B, it means that we're getting in front of other people's audiences who are really relevant to us as well.
Okay.
Yeah, the key ones.
Yeah. Maybe for like, there might be a couple of, more junior marketers listening as well that are also listening. Could you maybe break down just what partnerships in that matter mean? What does co-marketing with another product look like? Like, maybe you could give us one example. It doesn't have to be the brand, just an idea of how this relationship typically looks like and how that works.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's lots of different ways, to be honest, and some of them are opportunities that we generate for ourselves, and some of them are opportunities that people bring to us. So, for example, fantastic example, I'll be speaking on a webinar this afternoon that a partner of ours is putting together around the iOS 15 update. So they've just pulled together 5 or 6 people in the ecosystem that they think will have a point of view, and we're all doing a webinar together, and we'll all share that, you get the visibility for everyone's audiences, and sometimes there'll be a lead share there as well. The opposite way that could look is we run, for example, every January, LoyaltyLion runs a trends campaign where we look at the 12 trends that are going to be big that year. And we have obviously our trend, and then we invite 11 partners to be experts in that ebook as well and share their point of view, share their perspective and their knowledge. So it's typically it is content or webinars, blogs, white papers, etc. Just anywhere where you can work with someone else to bring the expertise to the table and get some visibility across audiences.
I see. A lot of marketers that we had on the show are super critical with their own website, right? Because obviously everything that you're pointing to, in the end, there's going to be a destination where people, sort of informing themselves and then deciding on whether and how they continue with LoyaltyLion. How do you think about the website? Like, what role do you attribute to the page, and maybe where do you see strength and maybe room for improvement?
It's such a good question. I think there's an expression someone told me very early in my career, which was that cobbler's children never wear shoes. And so it stands for, I think, every single marketer. You're so busy worrying about other people using your technology or helping them build their websites that yours is never quite where you want it to be. But I think there's a huge amount of opportunity there, because obviously everything that you do is driving people back to that website, essentially. So it's something that we should all be focusing a lot more on. And I think the more that people will release tools that help you do more A/B testing more easily, things like Google Optimize, those are incredible tools for a small team. Just means you can run some small manageable tests and make some really great decisions off the back of them.
Is there something that you have already in mind for the site? Like, sort of, I mean, typically we see people chatting about, bringing more interactivity to the page, bringing, more content, bringing persona-based content. Like, what's sort of the next couple of things that you guys are going to be doing?
Personalization is where I'd love to go next. As much as it concerns me when I see my own name splashed across a website, it really does work, and it shows people that you know them and you're serving them the right content. So personalization is definitely something I would like to explore more.
Okay, cool. Let's switch gears a little bit, right, and talk a little bit about marketing and digital marketing and more generically, because obviously you have been at quite a row of companies and have been collecting a lot of experience there. What do you personally find actually the challenge when it comes to bringing in innovation into the marketing function, right? So let's say you want to bring in innovation now. Like, what challenges do you face typically?
It's a really good question. I think the biggest challenge is it's often easier not to innovate or to think that somebody else is right with their approach. So a lot of the time, I think before the pandemic hit, we had actually sat down as a marketing team and decided that we were fed up with webinars. We were bored of hour-long presentations where 3 or 4 people go through some slides, etc. So we wanted to change the way we were going to do webinars. And but it took a lot to make that decision because everybody around us was doing webinars. And then obviously that got progressively worse over the coming months. But it would have been far easier to just keep doing them because everybody else was, and keep doing them in the same format. And when we launched a 15-minute webinar instead that we called E-commerce Espresso, it's shorter than your coffee break was the tagline. And the first couple of times that we said to partners, hey, do you want to come and speak on this thing? They were like, well, is there a presentation? And will it be an hour? And we said, no, this is different. But people were uncomfortable with that because they were used to a formula. So I think, long story short, I think the key challenge is it's often easier to just carry on doing things the way that you have. And it's often one person that has an idea, and it's important to take your team on a journey. So if you have an idea and you want to convince someone of something different, you need to get the data to back up your suggestion. So if you think that webinars are too long, get the drop-off rates from your webinar and prove that everybody's leaving at 14 minutes or whatever it might be, and start building a business case around that.
Super interesting. What happened to the 15 minutes webinar?
It's still going.
Nice.
Yeah, I think it's been going for about a year and a half now. We obviously, when COVID hit, we, as much as anyone, had to go back to traditional webinars, but we've tried to keep them much more as ask me anything sessions or panel debates, those kinds of things. We've still tried to steer quite clear of the long presentation approach.
Quite naturally, to the Pathway Presents podcast, we're always very curious about conversion rate optimization, and we love to learn a little bit about how marketers think about that. How do you, what do you think is the challenge when it comes to conversion optimization? You spoke about A/B testing already a little bit. Like, where do you see the challenges?
I mean, the challenge is undoubtedly you could test every single thing. And it's funny, we've actually just, we've got someone on the team who's focused on this, and I get very excited about what they're showing me, but I just want to see more and more and more. So I'm always saying, but could we test this and that and the other? And they're saying, yes, but it will have to happen in sequence. So, you need to run a fair test. So it needs to run for X number of weeks until we get X number of visitors. And I'm saying, okay, great, but what about the next thing? So I think, the real challenge in conversion rate optimization is making sure that you're measuring one thing and testing one thing at a time, because if you have too much that you're changing, you won't know what was successful.
The next one is a little bit challenging, and it's more like sort of a high level marketer question, because we're always very curious to see, like, let's say somebody like yourself being in a leading marketing role, like where typically does sort of the focus go first? Is it, on creating a roadmap? Is it growth initiatives that you think about? Is it nailing the messaging? Is it you deep diving into reporting? Somebody like yourself with all these responsibilities, like where does your hat turn?
I think it's a challenge of balancing all of them. And I would say the more strategic, the earlier it falls off your to-do list almost, which is not the right way around at all. But you get caught up in the day-to-day, supporting the team on things, and suddenly you find you haven't revisited your messaging for 6 months because you've been focused elsewhere. So I think it's a balance. The messaging is far and away one of the most important things, but really we all forget to invest too much time in it. And actually it's not just the messaging, it's then how do you train your team so that they're using it effectively. But if you're not doing your reporting at the same time or planning the sort of long-term vision, then you won't have the data you need to back up the messaging or to tell you where to go next. So it's a bit of a juggling act, I think.
Exciting. Let's switch gears. And now, since we're slowly coming to an end of the interview, we want to learn more a little bit about yourself, right? Since you were, talking about the 15-minute webinars, we love 15-minute, 20-minute interviews here at the Pathway Presents podcast. So should be right up your style. Like, I'm curious, you personally, right? There's a lot of marketing content out there. There's a lot to learn, a lot of things, as you were saying. You can never stop testing, never stop trialing things. How do you decide, like, where you actually read about marketing and what to digest and, maybe what to filter out? Like, what's your way of thinking about that?
I think for me, I'm a bit terrible for signing up to everything and then skim reading just the email headings or opening, HubSpot do a fantastic roundup email and I just skim the headlines, and a few of them I then open up in a tab and read later. But most things, you can get a pretty good steer for what the article is saying just from the headlines. So I'd say skim read a lot. One resource that I rate very highly is the Drift. I can't remember exactly what it's called, Drift Insider maybe, but they have a community with loads of great content, and there's a very good podcast on there as well. But to be honest, I would say my focus is actually slightly less on reading and slightly more on having conversations. It's surprising how many people are happy to compare notes if you just ask. And if you can find the same people in similar roles who are struggling with the same challenges as you, then having a conversation with them is where you'll learn an awful lot more than you will by reading a piece of marketing that somebody's put out for SEO reasons.
Very good. Since we're coming to an end of the interview, I would love to jump into our rapid fire questions. Are you ready for those?
Yes, I think so.
I think so far everybody kind of went through a life, so should be fine. Very good. What's the last book that you read?
The last book I read was called The Challenger Customer. Mm-hmm. And it's a very good, obviously a lot of people in sales will know the Challenger sale, and it's a very nice follow on from there, which just really helps you think about your marketing messaging and whether it's doing the job it needs to.
What's the one single thing your company is focused on the most at the moment?
Helping smaller businesses compete with brands like Amazon, using loyalty as a tool to help you stand out.
If there would be no boundaries in technology, what's the one thing that you want to have fixed for your role today?
Attribution, I think. Mm-hmm. There's lots of different ways, but no one's got it right. So,
what's the last thing that kept you awake at night about your company?
The marketing team's grown very, very quickly. And obviously we've all been working remotely. So how do we stay close and stay as a team that's learning from each other?
Mm-hmm. And last but not least, I'm very curious to ask you, because I always kind of love this question quite a bit. You joined, round about maybe 3 years ago, LoyaltyLion, something along that lines. And I would be curious if today would be the first day you're joining the team. What's the one advice you would give yourself?
Get closer to the product sooner. Product marketing.
Very good. Fiona, I really appreciate that you took the time with us today and showed us the world of LoyaltyLion, showed us your perspective on growth and marketing, and also a little bit of a peek insight on how you educate yourself and navigating the world of digital marketing. I want to give you the very last word. If somebody would be forgetting all that we discussed about LoyaltyLion, what's the one thing that they should remember?
One thing to remember is that loyalty isn't just a points and prizes thing. It can drive all of your other marketing activity as well.
Thanks a lot for being a guest on Pathline Presents.
Thank you for having me.